Hey everybody, this is Tom at Talent Guitar Works. And yesterday morning when I was drinking coffee and nerding on the computer, I accidentally stumbled upon the Center of the Guitar universe. Now I'm going to share that story with you. If you want to hear this story, go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel. And if you think you know what the location is, go ahead and type it in the comments below. If you're right, you may get something in the mail from Talent Guitar Works. Who knows? So we're going to start our story off with this cat named Johann. Johann lived in Germany in the late 1700s, early 1800 time period. And Johann was a member of a guild, the Cabinet Makers Guild. Now, there were many guilds at the time in Europe, artist guilds and tradesmen's guilds and craftsmen's guilds. And these were like modern day unions, except they had much more influence over the government. And the government would pose regulations based on the guild's recommendations to prevent them from usurping on each other's territories or intellectual domains. So Johann ultimately left Germany because of a battle with the violin makers guilds. The violin makers said the cabinet makers should not make guitars because they were stringed instruments and that was in their domain. The cabinet makers responded back that they had a new X-brace design for making guitars that was nothing like the fan brace design of the violin makers. Interesting, huh? So Johann moved to New York and then to Pennsylvania on the edge of the Pocono Mountains, and his son, C.F. Martin, opened Martin Guitars in 1833 and introduced the world to X-braced acoustic guitar design, which is used everywhere now, right? So this is from one little town in Germany where Martin came from. And the name of the town is Markneukirchen. And it's in Bavaria, right on the Saxony border and the border with the Czech Republic now. Now, it's interesting in the center of the universe because there are several other manufacturers that come from this tiny town. The next one is Hoyer. And Hoyer started in 1866. And if people don't remember Hoyer guitars, look up Scotty Moore's electric 12-string. Scotty was the guitar player for Elvis Presley, and that was the 12-string he used on the recordings. And now we have a guy who sold a guitar to this kid from England that appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show. And that was Hofner basses. That violin bass, Markneukirchen. And then we have modern-day Framus and Warwick that are still in that town. And Framus was established in that town much later than the other companies I mentioned, but still, it's a tiny town in Bavaria. So let's go over the history more. There were actually two towns to begin with. They sat side by side, Markneukirchen and Schönbach. Now, Schönbach is no longer there. It's now Luby in the Czech Republic. Now, what happened was this region was part of the Sudetenland that got divided up during World War II and then redistributed. So a portion of these guitar makers wound up in Saxony, which was East Germany, behind the Iron Curtain, and were restricted from selling to the West for over 40 years. And then a lot of the guitar makers and violin makers were German living in the Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia, and they got deported to Germany. Now, the Bavarians are great people. I've been there a bunch of times. The food's amazing. They're amazing. The culture is awesome. They have tons of craftsmen and artisans that live there, and they host, or they are the home of the International Wood Carving School in Oberammergau. So when they deported all these people back into Germany, they said, well, we have an empty brewery in Markneukirchen. We can put these people up, and they can establish this artist colony there and go forth. And they did. Now, the other rumor I heard was that Adolf Rickenbacher's family was originally from the area also before relocating to Basel, Switzerland, which is also a German-speaking portion of Switzerland. And that was back in 1887. Now, Rickenbacher is the father of the modern electric guitar with his frying pan design. So what happened to some of these companies and why are they lesser known than Gibson and Fender? C.F. Martin is known worldwide. Well, there was a reconstruction after World War II, and there was an embargo on U.S. guitars and they weren't allowed to be purchased in the United Kingdom. And this was because most of Britain got bombed out from the war, and they were trying to rebuild their country, their factories, and most importantly, their economy. So they didn't want their musicians relying on U.S. products that would hurt their economy and their growth. At the same time, Japan was rebuilding after the war, and they were starting up their own guitar companies with Ibanez and Yamaha and Mitsumoki and the other companies that were there. The German companies that were also trying to rebuild were doing a fairly good job, but the Japanese did a dump. And what that means is they produced a huge amount of guitars and priced them below market value in order to hurt existing brands. I'm sure the brands they were targeting were Gibson and Fender. That wasn't going to happen because Gibson and Fender were wildly sought after by the Europeans that couldn't get them. Maybe this is why the 59 is the most important Les Paul out there, because that's the year the embargo ended. So going forward, some of these companies went bankrupt in Germany, and then they reemerged. The last company that was there was Framus, and Framus was started by Fred Wilfer, and this was much after the other companies were established, and it closed down for a period of time and was reopened by his son, Hans Peter Wilfer. I've dealt with these people on a restoration of a 59 Sorrento from Framus. They're amazing. They're really helpful. My regret is while I was in Bavaria, I never got up to the Framus Warwick factory, and I never got up to the museum that's in Markneukirchen, and that's the musical instrument museum that features all the stringed instruments that were built in that area going back to the 1700s. So this is where I think the center of the guitar universe is, and I can draw more lineage out of there right now. There was this guy that came out of there, and his name was Lee, I believe, and he worked for Framus. And he went to work ultimately for Dan Armstrong in New York, and he changed his name to Bill Lawrence. Now, Bill Lawrence, after working with Dan Armstrong, ultimately worked with Dan's son, Kent Armstrong, winding pickups in London for the likes of Keith Richards and Rory Gallagher. So it's like the legacy reaches out and the spider web increases from this small town. If you've ever been in Bavaria, you know the towns aren't big. So tell me what you think about this. Remember, only half my ideas are any good. Remember to leave a remark in the comment section. If I think you're the winner, look for my reply, because I'll be asking what kind of instrument you play, and I'm going to be asking for an address to send something out to you. So this is Tom at Talent Guitar Works saying, only half my ideas are any good. You decide which half.